Whoa, sound the alarms. The beacons are lit. Gondor calls for aid. Fire the klaxons. We have some new Star Wars content that's out, and it is called The Mandalorian. And by that, I mean the first episode dropped on November the 12th, and I recently watched it. I think, in my humble opinion, it is the best Star Wars idea that's come out in 20 years. And that's gonna be a hotly contested idea, but stick around, let me explain. I honestly think that this is a genius way to take the Star Wars franchise and apply it to a genre they haven't really gone into yet. So stay tuned, and you'll notice I'm not on screen because I wanted to make this really quick, just saw it, and was like, I need to make a video, but we can't set up everything. We're in the middle of producing something else. Also, mild spoilers. Not very much, but a little bit of spoilers. If you want to go into the episode completely fresh, you know what to do. So The Mandalorian is a Western-style Star Wars story that is centering around a Mandalorian character. If you remember Boba Fett or Jango Fett, they're of the same kind of clan or tribe. They're the chivalrous knight-style bounty hunters in the Star Wars universe. I don't know too much about their lore, so I'm not going to get into it. What I've said already might be wrong, but my brother and I really love their design. And as soon as we heard about the show idea, we're like, you gotta watch it. You gotta see this thing. So the main thing most people have noticed, just by watching the trailer as well as any of the production material, is that it's about a bounty hunter, which draws a lot of parallels to Western movies. So I want to talk about the past 20 years Star Wars has had, and how this is, in my opinion, the smartest direction they could have gone. So, travel back with me, doodly-doodly-doo, to 20 years ago, in the year 1999, when everyone's favorite movie came out, Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. In a lot of people's minds, this was the beginning of the end for Star Wars. It was a movie, at the time, it was really well reviewed, but as we all know now, there is better Star Wars content out there. And since then, we had the prequel trilogy, which not too many people like. I have a soft spot for certain things in it, because I grew up with it. Ultimately, a lot of people don't really like it. Fast forward a little bit, and we have the Clone Wars series on Cartoon Network, which was really great, but it was a lot of the same. It was about the same kind of characters, same people in the prequel trilogy, and all of those storylines. Fast forward a little bit more, and we have Star Wars Rebels. Pretty good show that was very similar to Clone Wars, where some of the same characters actually carry on into Rebels. Then fast forward to recently in 2015, and we have the new trilogy, which started with Force Awakens, went to Last Jedi, and now we have Rise of Skywalker coming up pretty soon. So who knows how the last one's gonna be, but so far I've been okay with the movies, but again, they're seriously the same type of thing. They're the same kind of characters. We still have Leia and Han and Luke, so far they've all been new entries in the same story. And the only times we've had different stories flying around is the Star Wars stories, which are Rogue One and Solo. And this was their first foray into different genres for the Star Wars universe. But in my opinion, they didn't go far enough. And let's take a look at the examples. So Rogue One is a Star Wars war movie, and it fits the theme pretty well. It's about rebel spies that are trying to get the plans for the Death Star over to their rebel leaders. It's a simple premise and something that people have been thinking about in the background of the Star Wars franchise all the way since 1977 with the premiere of the first Star Wars movie. And it's pretty well executed. It unfortunately had a lot of different reshoots. There was an earlier version of the movie that had a different plot for the main character and other ideas floating around. And for more information about the story and production process of the movie versus the final film, check out Lady Knight the Brave, that's all one word, Lady Knight the Brave's channel, where she has an episode about Rogue One and calling it a flawed masterpiece, and why a lot of people like it, me included, but it does have some weird things that hold it back in slight ways. It's a pretty good war movie, where there's some rebel espionage in the beginning, but ultimately it ends in things that we've seen before. It's not completely new. The last 45 minutes are basically a cross between the Star Wars Episode 3 space battle we see in the beginning of Star Wars Episode 3, and the Star Wars Episode 5 Hoth battle we see in the beginning of Episode 5. Now, don't wag your finger at me. Episode 3 has some cool space battles. I still like them. They're good. Go watch it again. You'll be like, oh, this is not bad. I mean, they got like lens flares. It looks good. It holds up. So looking back at Rogue One, still a great time, but it's not really a unique idea, and it does crib from older war movies, but does similar things we've seen before. Now fast forward to Solo, a Star Wars story, where we have a Star Wars heist movie. Still not a bad idea. Characters that we already know and love, like Lando, Han, Chewie, and a couple people we don't, like Kira and What was his? One of them was played by Jarvis. I swear I watched the movie. I actually liked it. God, what were their names? Ultimately, the movie was a fun romp with a heist motif, but it didn't go full Ocean's 11 on it. There wasn't a grand master plan that everybody's trying to execute to heist this big, valuable thing away from some greedy empire. It was about smuggling characters all trying to pay a debt to different people. And more or less it focused on Han Solo's character and his origin story, and how he met Chewbacca, how he met Lando, his first love, a bunch of how he got started in the smuggling, I guess, all those kind of things. So still a different genre, and still interesting in my opinion. I have a soft spot for that movie. I actually went and saw it. I enjoyed it. Good job on y'all guys making that movie. I still loved it. But still, nothing super original. Now fast forward to November 12th, 2019. And we have the release of the first episode of The Mandalorian, which in my opinion is the most brilliant idea that they've had for Star Wars in those 20 years I just recounted to you. The reason why that is because it was a Star Wars Western. Star Wars has always taken a little bit from Western movies. Like look at Tatooine, a very Western aesthetic playing on this sand and long landscapes with those rolling hills. Also take Obi-Wan Kenobi for an example. A lone gunslinger who put aside his gunslinging ways, lightsaber slinging ways, to settle down, but is now being dragged back into this world that he left behind to help someone in need. Kinda like Shane or other Western protagonists. But let's focus back on The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is such a perfect execution of the Western style. We have the lone gunslinger, who is our protagonist, the Mandalorian. He's very shrewd and effective in that John Wick style of quick draw, but ultimately really empathizable. In the first couple minutes, he doesn't attack anybody unless provoked. And as we see later on in the episode, he does value life. Even when a droid shows up and kind of messes up his plans, he still doesn't want that droid to die, even though it's an inconvenience. So we have our protagonist and the world that he lives in, which is lawless, and there's bounties and all of these other gunslinging things like different bounty hunters. But along with that, we have these really beautiful landscapes that are really reminiscent of the Western feel. But why do these landscapes look so beautiful? Well, it's because Star Wars takes advantage of something called CinemaScope, which is what people understand as widescreen, or the way that films have those black bars on the top and bottom in comparison to the video you're watching right now, which is in a 16:9 aspect ratio. Those are usually 2:35:1. So why use CinemaScope? Well, CinemaScope is something that's existed for a long time, but Star Wars made a really good use of back in 1977, when we see all of these long, wide landscapes that give this space fantasy setting a lot of life. Just like when C-3PO and R2-D2 are walking through this entire planet just trying to find civilization. And The Mandalorian continues that tradition by using Cook anamorphic lenses. Those are lenses that make this nice creamy background that most modern films are known for. Now let's talk a little bit about CinemaScope, anamorphic lenses, and their history, and what led to the current way that we watch movies today. Anamorphic lenses were created by Henri Cretin, or Henry Cretin, he's a French guy, during World War I, and weren't used until a short film in 1927 called Construire un feu, which means to build a fire. Yes, I did take French in high school. So the way that a regular lens works is very similar to glasses. They take light and then refract it through a piece of glass to better fit how your eye looks. But the way that anamorphic lenses change the game is that most regular lenses have a circular aperture or circular hole where the light comes in, but an anamorphic lens has an ovular or oval hole where the light comes in. This changes the format of the image entirely, where the image looks like someone took their hands on both sides and squished it together and made a very narrow image. But the cool thing about this is that if you stretch that image back out until it looks normal, now you have more information on either sides of the image. Early movies were shot in what is considered a square aspect ratio or a 4:3 aspect ratio. This image is good, but it doesn't have a lot of room on the sides. But now we're used to CinemaScope, which is a really nice wide image that has a lot of room on each side. The other cool effect that anamorphic lenses have are the different bokeh that are in the background. Now, for people that don't know what bokeh is, or bokeh, or buck, or however people pronounce it, bokeh are those little shimmering dots you see in the background that look like unfocused light. They're usually what people think of when they think of like an indie movie or something that's really artistic, is a very shallow depth of field with a lot of bokeh in the background. Now, anamorphic lenses, because the light is shot through an oval instead of a circle, create oval-style bokeh. This is considered to be honestly kind of a high quality look because anamorphic lenses are super expensive, but they also create a really interesting background that isolates the subject of the image. For more on this actually, go check out Nerdwriter's video on Toy Story 4 and how Bo Peep's character actually has a digitally created anamorphic lens film her, while Woody has a more standard lens filming him, to show the difference in characters. But even though the first anamorphic short film was created in 1927 in France, the first time it was used in Hollywood was in 1953 with the movie The Robe. However, anamorphic lenses in CinemaScope found a beautiful home in the Western film. Western movies have really wide landscapes, which is perfect for CinemaScope or for anamorphic lenses that stretch an entire image to be really wide. And they started using anamorphic lenses in movies like Bad Day at Black Rock, which came out in 1955, and the movie Ride Lonesome, which came out in 1959. And these Western movies would solidify the idea of CinemaScope being a Western image, or other movies with really wide landscapes like Lawrence of Arabia. So anamorphic lenses in CinemaScope actually found a beautiful home with the Western movie. And The Mandalorian is no exception. The landscapes in the show look so good. And you can tell that they're shot on anamorphic because when things go out of focus, you see those nice oval bokeh in the background. And it's not just our protagonist, it's not just anamorphic lenses, but also the set design. If you look in this image, the windows are actually really wide. The set design is playing off the fact that this was shot with anamorphic lenses for CinemaScope and also the Western feel. On top of that, during action sequences, some of the settings have very similar structures to Western towns in Western movies. Take a look at this screenshot from the Clint Eastwood movie Fistful of Dollars. All of those buildings in the background are short and wide, which benefit that CinemaScope style. And if we look back to The Mandalorian, during an action sequence, all of the buildings are short and wide. It's basically a Star Wars style Western town, which is absolutely genius, and it fits the entire theme even more. Every single bit of this first episode is feeding into the idea of a Star Wars Western, which we haven't seen before. Even in the Star Wars War film, it still felt like a Star Wars film. In the Star Wars Heist film, it felt more like a Han Solo origin film. And all of this feeds into my thesis that for the past 20 years, we haven't seen this much time, effort, and care be put into something in Star Wars that's adapted for a different genre. And I think it's a really great step in the right direction. But on top of all of that, the episode had some really fun use of the Star Wars canon, like they do a nod to the Star Wars Christmas special. Let me know if you found it, let me know, call me out in the comments if you recognize that. And they use some Star Wars alien species that we haven't seen in a long time, maybe since like the original trilogy. And ultimately, it's just a really good entry in the Star Wars series with a completely different twist on the genre that I think is completely justified, and plays into the entire idea of Mandalorians and bounty hunters and that entire culture in the Star Wars lore. But that's enough of me gushing about the episode. I mean, I haven't even seen the other 7 chapters. They haven't been released yet. Could take a big old swan dive like Game of Thrones. But what did you guys think? Did you like The Mandalorian? Did you get Disney Plus? Or are you gonna wait till all 8 chapters are released and then buy a subscription? Or just mooch off your friends? I'm not saying I did that, but I'm not saying I didn't do that. But I'm really excited about this new direction they're taking, so in the comments, let us know how you feel about it. And if you didn't like this video, well, you know what to do, but if you liked it, please give us a big old thumbs up, consider subscribing, smashing the like and subscribe and the bell, doing all that stuff, and please feel free to leave a comment because that helps us out a whole bunch, and we want to hear from you. I want to hear what you think about the DeLorean. I made this whole video because I'm so excited. So let us know, and no spoilers, don't spoil it. Don't spoil it, but have a good time in the comments. Now, if you excuse me, I'm gonna go freeze myself in carbonite until the next episode comes out. So I'll see you all in the next video, and later, Space Cowboy. Are you gonna carry that weight? Other Cowboy Bebop quote. May the Force be with you. Goodbye.